Okay, guys, so today we are working on adding and subtracting with decimals. So you should have both of these papers up off the bookshelf. I am going to help you guys fill out your notes, and we're going to do one of the examples together at the same time. So that way you understand what we're talking about here on our notes, and we can do that example together. So the very first thing is when we are adding and subtracting, the very first thing that you always want to do is you want to make sure that all of your numbers are lined up by their place value. A simpler way to put that is just make sure their decimals are lined up, right? We won't get a correct answer if our decimals are not in the same place and we're adding and subtracting different place values from each other. So that's got to be our first step here. So when I look at my example, I have 3 and 421 thousandths plus 9 and 5 tenths plus 12 and 85 hundredths. So I'm going to make sure that I have all of my place values lined up, that their decimals are lined up. So the very first number I'm going to start with is 3 and 421 thousandths. Our next one, I'm going to go ahead and put that decimal there and just copy it down exactly how I see it. 9 and 5 tenths. And our last one, again, I'm going to put that decimal, and I know in 12 and 85 hundredths, there's a 2 in the ones position, a 1 in the tens, and then 85 hundredths. So I've got those all lined up by their place value. All my tenths are in a row, all my hundredths are in a row, ones are in a row, and then I have my lone 10 and thousandths all by themselves. So once I've lined those numbers up by place value, if it helps, add zeros to fill in those missing gaps. So for example, in 9 and 5 tenths, I can put a 0 in the hundredths place and the thousandths place to give it the same number of place values, the same number of digits as 3 and 421 thousandths. I can also come down to our last number and add a 0 in the thousandths place. And if I wanted to, I could add zeros in the tens place as well. Okay, so once I have them all lined up by place value, once I've added zeros, then I am going to start with the smallest place value. So that means start as far as you can to the right. So since I'm adding, I need to add 1 plus 0 plus 0, which gives me 1. I need to add 2 plus 0 plus 5, which would give me 7. 4 plus 5, which gives me 9, plus 8, which gives me 17. So I'm going to write the 0, carry the 1. Then I have 1 plus 3, which gives me 4. 4 plus 9, which gives me 13. 13 plus 2, which gives me 15. So I'm going to write the 5, carry the 1. And then 1 plus 0 plus 0 plus 1 would give me 2. So now that I've added all of those numbers together, now I need to bring down the decimal. So all I do is I drop that decimal straight down. So right now I get an exact final answer of 25 and 771 thousandths. And then just to make sure that we did everything correct, our last step is to estimate to see if our answer is reasonable. We talked about yesterday with estimating, it helps us check, did we get close to a right answer? Did we put our decimal in the right spot? And then we talked about certain benchmark decimals. So 3 and 421 thousandths, a reasonable estimation for that number could be 3 and 5 tenths. 9 and 5 tenths is already a pretty good estimation or a pretty good benchmark number, so I'm going to leave that there. And then 12 and 85 hundredths. Well, when I look at my numbers, I have them both rounded to the tenths place. So I kind of want to stick with that trend. So I'm going to keep 12 and 85 hundredths. And if I were going to round it to the tens, I have the number 8 in the tenths place. 5 is to the right, so 5 or more raise the score. So that means that when I round 12 and 85 hundredths to the tenths place, I get 12 and 9 tenths. So now if I add these all together, I have 5 plus 5, which gives me 10, plus 9 more, which gives me 19. So write the 9, carry the 1. I have 9, that's a 1 plus 3, which gives me 4, plus 9, which gives me 13, plus 2 more, which gives me 15. So write the 5, carry the 1, and then 1 plus 1, which gives me 2. Then again, last step is to bring down that decimal. So I got an exact answer of 25 and 771 thousandths and an estimated answer of 25 and 9 tenths. I'd say that those two are pretty reasonable. They're pretty close to each other, so I did the right job. Okay, so for our next example, this time we're going to do a subtraction problem, but our steps are still the same, except for this time we're going to subtract instead of add. So step number 1 is to line up our numbers by the place value. Remember, that just means make sure the decimals are lined up. So my example here is 17 and 92 hundredths minus 4 and 88 hundredths. Okay, so add zeros if it helps. So if I wanted to, I could add a 0 right here in the tens just to kind of help me out. And then I'm going to start with the smallest place value, which in this example is our hundredths position. So my first step would be to do 2 minus 8. But I can't do 2 minus 8. I don't have enough here. So I've got to go borrow from the 9. So my 9 becomes an 8, and this 2 becomes a 12. And now I can do 12 minus 8, which is going to give me 4. Then I can do 8 minus 8, which gives me 0. 7 minus 4, which gives me 3. And 1 minus 0, which gives me 1. Next step is to bring down that decimal. So I get an exact answer of 13 and 4 hundredths. But let's estimate to check if our answer is reasonable. So I'm going to round this one to the tenths place. I feel like that's going to give me a pretty good estimate. So if I round to the tenths, 9 is in the tenths position, 2 is next door, so that's 4 or less. We're going to give it a rest. So 17 and 92 hundredths just becomes 17 and 9 tenths. 4 and 88 hundredths. I've got an 8 in the tenths position, an 8 next door, so that's 5 or more, raise the score. So that means that my 8 that is currently in the tenths position needs to be raised to a 9. So my rounded number becomes 4 and 9 tenths. Now I'm going to start with the smallest place value. So I have 9 minus 9, which would give me 0. 7 minus 4, which would give me 3. 1 minus nothing. I could put a 0 there if I wanted to. So 1 minus 0 would give me 1. Bring down the decimal. And I have an estimated answer of just straight up 13, which I would say is pretty darn close to 13 and 4 hundredths.